Can you hear me, Sharon?
Yeah, I can hear you. Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you. Even though I don't have my headphones on, I know I can hear you. Okay, who am I trying to admit? Okay, there's Kyle. Hi, Kyle.
Virtual backgrounds, and I'm going to take off.
Okay.
What was that all about?
There we go.
Did you have to be the host? That was weird.
Oh yeah, I guess. Probably because it's set up using my my Zoom. Yeah, I'm using my Zoom account.
Okay.
Should
would be why.
Yeah, should we start using the CRC account?
Yeah.
Okay.
I think so.
Let's do that. I'll make a note of that, and I'll ask Olivia to set us up. Yeah. Okay. No, Kevin was going to join us, and he may still. Have you guys heard from him or not?
No, in fact,
not.
I tried to call him this morning, and his voicemail box was full and couldn't receive messages. And I sent him an email through the CRC email, and I haven't heard back from him. So, don't know what's happening with him.
Okay. When I spoke with him very briefly earlier today about one of the issues that's going to come up in our meeting, and he was very pressed. Like he had a lot of meetings going on, and so but he's here. I have to admit him. Here he is.
Oh yeah.
Oh. He's gracing us.
Sitting perfectly still in his suit and tie.
Kevin, are you there? He hasn't joined yet. Okay, so Kyle, I will email Olivia and ask her to please set our meeting up with the CRC Zoom account.
Would appreciate that, and if you can't, certainly do that.
Sure. Okay.
Boss.
All right, there he is. Hello.
Okay. So it looks like we are recording. And Sharon, are you agreeable to continue with notes?
Yes.
Excellent.
All right. So for the sake of time, I would love for us to just kind of jump to things and get started. So last week in this time slot, Sharon, some copious notes I really appreciated, and those serve as our minutes. Anyone see any changes or additions I'd like to make as we're drafting?
I did not see any changes.
Okay.
Yeah, I noticed.
Great. Okay. Seeing no hands, then just to accept those, since we are going to make those formal and our records formal per Randy, then motion second to approve the minutes. Anyone?
Motion to approve minutes.
Okay.
I second.
Great. Okay. Any conversation? Okay, none. All in favor for accepting the minutes from last week's 3:23 meeting? Aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
What?
Kevin's
Okay,
opposed.
any opposed?
No, I was just slow in reacting.
Oh, I thought, ooh, this would be juicy. What?
I don't like minutes.
Okay.
Oh my God, wait, I'm not the chair. I want to just disrupt the meeting.
Thank you.
You're fired. Has everyone been able to see the draft agenda from mailed out last night?
Yeah.
Okay. Formal. There have been some additions from Jane today. I think those fit within the agenda as posted. Any other changes or additions to the agenda today? Okay. I would entertain a motion to accept the agenda.
Motion to accept.
Okay.
Seconded.
Okay. Any discussion? Come on. Nothing.
Kevin, you must have something.
It can agenda looks great.
Okay, all in favor then? Aye.
Bye.
Bye.
Okay, any opposed? Nobody's left. No abstentions. Great. Okay, so we are behind already. So I think we have kind of a summary of the outputs of the February 23 meeting here as it's written in our agenda. I just wanted to kind of summarize the energy and the talks and some of our takeaways from that meeting before we got started, and just kind of reiterate what I saw a couple days ago from Randy about public access and tracking of the meeting. Any discussion on last week's output? So I think we basically get to those and they'll be read kind of into the record as we go through the topics in it today. One of those that came out of it, we were the first committee to meet across the board and had talked some about trying to capture notes / minutes and the audio recording. The note posted now, at least in the Microsoft 365 part of Teams, the files under Teams. So with that, and Tony and I were able to sort of track a first Zoom record and store that. So because those are yours, these first two are on yours, and we'll have to figure out how to get from you as a zip file, and you and I can work on that this week so we can get those posted.
It seems, unfortunately, the
Okay.
first meeting we had wasn't recorded for some reason on my system. I don't know why. So I did in setting up this meeting, I did an automated recording of the meeting as soon as it started. So I think all I need to do is upload the recording file to the Microsoft Teams 365 folder for this meeting once we conclude the meeting. I think I should be able to handle that pretty straightforwardly based
Okay.
on what folders you've
That'd be
created.
great.
And yeah, and Sharon, I guess, have you already populated the folder with your notes from last meeting?
No,
I
I
did
only
that
sent them by
for-
email. Did you do that, Kyle? So should I do that
I
this
did
week?
that already for.
Should I attempt to file it in the proper location?
Sure, if you want help with that, it's fairly straightforward. The recording took a few minutes just because they're so expansive or data heavy, but the notes are really easy. So we
I'll
even
give it a
stay
go and
late today, and I show you that.
okay, I don't mind giving it a try, and if I need assistance, I'll let you know.
Okay, great. It seems like I'm a little slow. My connection might be slow. I'm
Yeah,
home
it's a little.
today.
Your voice is coming across a little crackly, but I can understand you though.
Shoot. Okay. Okay, well, we'll keep moving. So we want to give time. We didn't have Kevin's presence last, which was tragic. Now we do, and we had given some time, each of us, to kind of introduce our motivations and thoughts on participating in this particular committee. And I would love to hear from Kevin on his thoughts. And recall that he had posted the first of the sort of concepts for justice and equity for work moving forward, and that was kind of the citizen board or the citizen commission. So take it away, sir.
It's funny. I often am up in the middle of the night, and for some reason, when I am, my brain starts going, and I have all sorts of ideas. And that's kind of how that idea came to me. But then last night I had another one thinking about not just Citizens Commission, but what could we do on true equity within the county government structure. And so my motivation for this, and I'm sorry, I'm getting a bit of an echo. So I'm hearing myself, which is odd. Anyway, my initial motivation is that I want our county to be just a beacon of hope and real justice. And for me, the county government needs to lead by example. And I'm not sure we have. We do not have a law enforcement agency that I believe has at least as blatant of some of the racial undertones and injustices like that we've seen in Seattle and other places. However, we have in the past had deputies who were totally out of line and not necessarily called on it. I can't think of any examples recently. Most of the ones I'm aware of are years old. There's questions within all of law and justice, though, for me. It's not just the sheriff's department. It's also looking at the prosecuting attorney's department. It's also looking at the courts. And it's not to say that there's actually problems. It's to say, how could we improve things? How could the status quo be improved and be more equitable for anybody who's going through that system on any level? And then, so that for me raised the issue of a commission or a committee that would be independent. And for me, it would not just, I'm not talking about just oversight of the sheriff. I'm talking sheriff, the full law and justice system. So prosecutor, courts, sheriff's department. At this point, I don't have a position on whether or not the sheriff should be appointed versus elected. And I don't think that's it's not under the purview of this committee. But for me, it also is not a law and justice issue. It's more of a management structure issue. And I know in other counties with their charters, that's come under the same discussion, and maybe it will with our full commission, but I'm not there now. In addition to the commission, however, some of the other ideas that I've had, and one that struck me last night is, we have an equal pay law finally, as of last year, 2 years ago in Washington State. We haven't done an audit of if gender equality truly exists in our own county government. And keep in mind, the county is the largest employer in the county with 217 employees. So are there women who are being paid less for the same jobs? And it's one thing to say that we're equitable and just, and when we don't have the knowledge to prove that we are. And so I think some sort of audit. And what struck me last night was, how far can we push these things as a charter versus individual ordinances and policies? And what struck me is that I believe we may have an opportunity within the charter to actually really begin to address some of these things. And the part that struck me is, if we said we wanted an audit, that's borderline kind of, Ron Sims and others would argue, no, that's absolutely within our purview. What struck me is, if we said there should be an annual audit done by this commission or something like that, I think that starts to put it more in our bailiwick as far as an ongoing part of the process or the structure for the county. But specific to the question, Kyle, my motivation is to make San Juan County be just a really bold and exciting example of what it can mean to be just and equitable across the board, whether you're talking gender identification, where you're talking where you're talking racial justice, sexual preference, whatever it may be. That's it, says the straight white guy. Oh, one other thing, actually. So there's been a lot of conversations, and I understand someone in this committee, about the part of the racial justice piece needs to be building deeper relationships with the Salish people. And I really want to dive into that. And I've got a lot of specific ideas on that, and I don't need to go into them. And they're not my ideas. They're ideas that came out of the discussions we had over the summer here on Orcas with Coast Salish elders and leaders, to look at names in the county, to look at other ways to start addressing some of the colonial playbook that's been played very well here.
a great term. I'm writing that down.
We're actually writing one.
Okay. Who's we?
I'm working with some Lummi elders to, another gentleman we're working with, used the expression, he said it's kind of the typical colonial playbook that there's a playbook that gets used in a community globally when you wipe out indigenous. And one of the Lummi elders said, oh my God, I've never thought of it that way. And then we started talking about we should write the colonial playbook so that it's actually obvious when it's being used, because a lot of it isn't as obvious. And even those of us who think we're, very progressive and open-minded do and say things that we don't recognize as being part of that playbook. And then what we said is first you write that part, and then you write the second piece, which is the anti-playbook on how you decolonialize a community.
I love.
I'm sorry, I was just telling Mike.
And
I was just telling Mike to take a message for me because somebody was calling. Sorry.
It's okay. Didn't hear you. Okay, I appreciate you weighing in. That helps with kind of setting direction and some synergizing with some of the things that came up last week or that were talked about last week. Okay, I had set aside some time. We're behind, which is no surprise. Some time to talk about kind of two pieces. Can push this back in the agenda, but number one, how will this group report back to the general mission? What do we want to focus on, highlight? Who will do that, and what will be the format of that? We didn't get to format with the general group last week, and maybe it doesn't make sense to have 8 or 9 committees that come up with a different setup for that. But I would like to think about that because Wednesday. And I haven't looked at the agenda for Wednesday, but one of these weeks we'll have to have a setup. So I'd like to just hear some conversation or thoughts on what people think for that approach. Kevin,
Just
go
point
ahead.
of order, I'm not understanding what you're asking.
Well, how will the committees report back to the general commissionship when we gather up and talk? How will we talk about the productivity or the topics or the business carried on each time? Go ahead.
Yeah, we just had a meeting on this today, actually, Olivia and I and a couple others. What we're going to be asking is that each committee beginning this Wednesday, give us an update if you feel you have one. The format will be kind of loose, but what I'll be asking for is really, are there topics that are already beginning to rise to higher level within your committee? So are there subjects that you think are probably going to be something that you want to bring back to the full commission for consideration? And 2 reasons for that. One is to get other commissioners, the main reason, to get other commissioners and the public going into our town halls, thinking about what ideas are percolating up. The second one is some of those may need legal inputs. And so I want to begin compiling those. You probably saw the back and forth with Randy in response to his smug email. I'm sorry, I'm over it. I don't have an inner voice anymore either. But what I'd like to do is begin sending some of those to Randy as they come up, so that we don't just slam him with 50 questions in late May.
Sure.
Actually, one other piece on that quickly, Kyle, if I may, is there may be some topics where it truly is not within the scope of the Charter Review Commission or the Charter. And so we don't want to spend a lot of time as a committee or as a full commission discussing those if in the end we're not able to go there.
Was there any discussion today about time limits, or you said, keep it loose? I appreciate that, but any thoughts about that part?
No, I think we're going to give about 45 minutes to this portion of the agenda. Be a little longer.
Okay.
I wanted this, this is the crust of our work. And so my intention for Wednesday is that we're going to give this the amount of time it needs, particularly because it's going to inform our work going forward and again, inform those town halls.
Okay. That works out to something like 4 or 5 minutes per if there's equal access.
And
Okay. Did we lose for?
I don't believe it'll be equal. I think some committees are going to have a lot to say and some are going to have very little. Some are going to, I actually know, well, as of this morning, there was at least one or two who were like, I don't have anything to update at this point.
Right. Did you catch all of that? I couldn't tell if you stay.
Who, me?
I'm wondering if Jane, sorry, I'm not clear. Jane, did you hear all of that exchange?
Yeah, I did. Sorry. My husband
Okay.
just had to come in and get some files
That's-
for my office. So I beat him up and threw him out. So he's gone now.
Let's go
Why
around.
people go to opposites. I'm trying to hear Mike is on the phone with my friend. I'm like, I could plug my headset into it. Okay.
So for the review, is there anything else about that reporting out? Who makes sense to do that? Would it be the note taker or since we're sort of exchanging kind of who runs the meeting from week to week? I know I see some value in kind of summarizing each time after we meet so that we've got kind of the top items, but that does take time. That takes time indeed. So
Yeah, I could do that. If somebody else wants to take that on, I'm perfectly happy with that. But I don't, I mean, we're all busy, so I don't mind taking it on if you prefer that I kind of pare down the notes to give a little briefing.
Yeah, I mean, we can share the load, we can take turns, doing that high level summary each week if you want. And then it's not, just one person who has to do it. But whatever, I'm flexible as well. I would just suggest that we keep it really high level and structured in a way that people can kind of understand where have we moved from the issues that were on our, original spreadsheet. Just to do a brush overview of, okay, so we've looked into those. Some of them we're examining in more detail now, or we've amalgamated some, I'm building them together and massaging them a bit to see what they really are made of. We could share information about the plan to do outreach, to speak with different stakeholders. But I would suggest it's, kind of like 4 or 5 high level bullet points and just keep it very brief. That would be my suggestion.
okay, we will have met one more time before the town halls. So I would suggest that as a stronger agenda item next week, that we clearly articulate that list both for next week's regular meeting, and so that and I'm still not clear on what format will be used in the town hall, how you will do and maybe Kevin, you can speak to this, how we will kind of introduce each session so that listeners are clear on the committees and so forth. That is an agenda item at the end of today, but it sort of fits. So if we make one sort of outline report out on our more prominent topics, then I think it could work in both settings. Any other thoughts?
I can touch on that when we get to the agenda item at the end.
Okay. Okay, I had wanted to set aside time then for, we had talked a fair amount the last time about looking over the King County Charter and potentially other outside resources, including MRSA and, I didn't get that right, MC rather, and any other research that people were able to do on how the topics are addressed in other documents in other charter counties. And I would entertain that conversation now. Jane.
Sure, yeah, I'll just make sure I'm not on mute here. I just wanted to pick up on what I've shared with you guys today in the way of resolution number 31, 2020, that was referenced by Mike Thomas last week when he spoke with us and made his presentation. You'll recall that I asked the question about where the county stands on issues of justice and equity, and he mentioned that the council had passed a resolution last year on issues of diversity, equity, and inclusion. And so in a rapid effort to do a little bit of homework for today, I was able to obtain the signed resolution. I found it on the website. I couldn't find it at first and wrote to Randy and Mike asking, did a final version get signed? Because I found a draft version online, which was interesting. And they got back to me and said, indeed, it was signed and it is online. And Randy told me how you have to, if you're looking for resolutions, there are multiple pages of resolutions in any given year. So you have to scroll back up to the top and then just keep going to page 2 or 3 online. Anyway, long story short, this is it's a solid resolution in many ways. It is, however, from what I understand, it's policy. It's not, and it does not direct the county government or elected offices to do anything specifically. And so when I wrote back to Mike, copying Randy, and Kevin was copied on a couple of these exchanges, I said, so, what's come of that resolution? What did that resolution result in? And are there inbuilt accountabilities or oversight or, requirements on the part of the county government or any such thing to fulfill obligations that it's kind of put out there in this resolution? Now, Mike offered to have a conversation with me about that and or give me some email background info on it. But I will do that in the course of this week so I can get some more information from him. Randy got back to me just really quickly, just off the top of his head. He said one thing that both the court and the prosecuting attorney's office has done is to get some training and some speakers in to talk about the sort of unconscious bias in decision making that is done, and what they as staff and officials need to be mindful of in their decision making, et cetera, related to sort of unconscious bias. And so it sounds like he said I asked him in an email, can I circle back to you to get a little bit more information about what your office may have done in response to this resolution? He said, sure, no problem. And I said, because I'm just in an early stage of gathering some information. So I guess my point here is, I think given that this resolution exists, we would do well to find out what teeth does it have? What has it impacted, if anything, yet? And it's not an ordinance, right? So it's not law. So obligations aren't built into this. So nevertheless, it is a statement by our council that they care about these things, and it's not. Actually, you would find it interesting in the draft version. There were some specific things that they wanted the sheriff to do to look into the use of certain types of force when they're arresting people and things like that. So that is not in the 2-page resolution that was passed. And so what I would offer is to have that conversation with Mike, get more detail on what have department heads done with this? What have any elected officers done with this resolution? And then, I can bring that information back. And then the other thing I can share is that I went on to the MRSC page that is on diversity, equity, and inclusion. And indeed, on that page, there are a number of examples of counties across the state that have embraced, be it strategies on diversity, equity, and justice, equity and inclusion, be it policies or what have you. I didn't see anything that was like what the King County Charter Review Commission came up with in terms of something more structural that would be introduced to the county's charter and make something more, inbuilt. And so I think we need to consider yeah, what might something structural be? And is it feasible? Are there any other examples other than what King County came up with that we could look to, and have some discussion around the value of that versus, having something that's more resolutions based and more policy oriented, and is that sufficient? And I think we're probably going to feel maybe not. And then the only other thing I would offer is a comment on Olivia's offer to bring Peter Fisher in to talk to us on tribal issues, and I think that's something we should have a conversation about, because I know that some of us feel it's important to look at some of those tribal concerns and considerations and issues along the lines of what Kevin's talked about and along the lines of what you've talked about, Kyle. And yeah, so those are the three things I wanted to put out to you.
Questions or comments for Jane, Kevin?
Going back to my lack of an inner voice, I find it appalling that last year, in the height of the BLM movement and recognition of historic racism and inequality, that our county passed a resolution. As I've said before, and actually, I've said this too, on the website for newdealsanjuanislands.org, there's a write-up on shall versus should that I wrote about a year ago. And it's specifically on this topic. It talks about resolutions versus ordinances. And the fact that resolutions are what you do if you want to celebrate somebody's birthday. They're not what you do to take action.
Yeah.
I think you called them wallpaper last time. Something close to that.
Yeah. And it is absolutely no surprise, and I've seen the same thing in my research, Jane, that the MRSC website has a bunch of different positions and statements that counties and cities and other governments have taken. Look, having been a politician for 14 years, I speak politics fluently. And one of the first things you learn in politics is if you're non-committal, it's a good thing. The most non-committal politician I've ever met from Washington State went the furthest in politics of any politician nationally ever. And I'm not going to say who that was, but they were governor, and then they might have been in the Obama administration. It's really easy. And so for us to have a resolution on justice and equity that no one has to follow, there's no teeth whatsoever. I think King County is the benchmark. Putting it in the Constitution is even more powerful than in the Charter, which I'm just going to start calling our Constitution. It's even more powerful than the county council passing an ordinance, because another county council can reverse that ordinance. They can do anything they want. If it's in the Charter, it can only be changed by a vote of the people, and only every 10 years. If we want to stand up and be bold on justice and equity, I think we put something in the Charter. And it's not a resolution. It's really sad. The other thing I would say is on the tribal issue with Peter Fisher. I shared this with Jane. Peter's a beautiful person. He's not the person we hear from on tribal issues. I would ask that we reach out to Sharon Kinley, who's one of the senior cultural leaders and tribal elders with the Lummi Nation. She's also the Dean of Cultural Studies at the Northwest Indian College. And she's just an incredible person. And then Jay Julius, past chair of the Lummi Nation, would be another good one. As Sharon is aware, we had a very engaged community process here on Orcas Island in response to COVID. And we had a series of meetings with Lummi leaders and elders and other Coast Salish leaders. And out of that came some good ideas. And I think they're ready to bring those to our attention. And I think some of those could fit very well within the Charter. Again, to put teeth on them, I'm kind of tired of elected officials that say too much and do very little.
Yeah.
Would you spell Sharon's last name for me, Kevin?
Kinley.
Kinley, okay.
Kinley.
This brings up questions for me, partly as chair and partly just for process. Not seeing that an hour is going to work for us in the future. And part of that is, to think, do we say next week we sort of assign next week's meeting to a single topic and make that, inclusion of language or sorting out where to put, where to sort of focus specifically on the first topic we just talked about, and then maybe the following week cover, Native affairs or intertribal communication. I'm not sure how to do it and honor the people who would come talk to us with, sufficient time for both presentation and questions. So I'm curious what you guys all think about how to structure the approach and the use of time in the committee, on the committee platform.
Well, I think we've got a couple things. We've got, how much do we need to reinvent the wheel, and what other, and, Jane's already, started looking into sources of what can we draw from that already exists. And then there's another piece, of course, that is getting input from people in the community, which I started doing this week and I will continue to do into next week. Just hearing from people in our community about their experiences, what they think needs to happen, how are we doing thus far, what would improve the situation, from people who would potentially be most impacted by racism in our county.
And I would love to hear from any number of people that we come up with. I think for sake of time and for continuity of the conversation, I would just wonder what the best, what that sort of structure is. Do we go meeting for, do we pick a topic or pick a sub area of what we want to work on and dedicate one of meetings to that? Or do we try and have each meeting cover, portion of our top three, say? Kevin?
You could obviously split it either way. I do think that you take a topic like a justice committee, and it's going to obviously cover almost everything we're talking about within that. But if we want to narrow it down to the specific actions, I think that's possible. We could say, like, okay, are we interested in that? If so, what does it look like? I will say that on that subject, there's a whole secondary question for me, which is how much authority can we give them through the charter? And I think it's a great deal. We could set it up as, you could set it up as an agency if you wanted. You could have a similar conversation of what you're having with the climate commissioner position. But anyway, we want to think about that. But for your question, you can structure it as far as topics, and I think that makes sense. And then if you're going to have a speaker, though, I would say that you dedicate a subject matter just to that subject, so that after immediately out, like maybe if Sharon Kinley speak to us, we could spend the rest of our meeting or an entire meeting with her, just talking about what could happen. But I think a lot of that will be us bouncing the ideas back and forth. I think they'll give suggestions. So I think with speakers, I think you plan it around their subject for our follow-up discussion as well. But I think you could also break it down for separate meetings upon the actions. So list out what our different discussion points are and then start talking about them.
Anyone else? Thoughts or input?
A thought on what Kevin was just talking about in terms of this Law and Justice Oversight Committee that that was established for King County. I wonder if it could be interesting to invite somebody from that county government to talk to us about how this will play out. Okay, because now it's been approved by the voters, and I think it could be quite interesting. They may be pretty early in their conversations about that as a county government, but I think it could be very interesting to do a bit of a, to hear from them as to how are they organizing themselves to establish this. Does the committee yet have terms of reference? what have they done to explore what relationships this committee will have with different parts of government, and so on and so forth. Because to me, we need to kick the tires a bit on this concept and see whether it would work for this county. And I think that's one area of exploration we need to take with this idea. And I do think that it would be good to have at least one, maybe two conversations with our own county government representatives, elected and or appointed, as to what are their views on the sufficiency of the resolution. Because I take very much Kevin's point. It's not even an ordinance. Yeah. So I mean, I get it. I mean, it smacks of all the gender equality work I've done my entire career. There are so many critical things that need to happen for a policy to become reality, and not the least of which is commitment at the top, in your senior leadership, and that would drive everything that follows. I can use as a comparator the environment, compared to gender equality, for example, and often environmental issues are legislated, and when they're legislated, they definitely have more teeth. Not so much they can anyway in some contexts. I mean, I'm thinking about a department I worked in Canada, but yeah. So these things are. I appreciate what Kevin's saying about, if we are serious about looking at justice and equity issues as a county for the future, what would that look like? And if it's going to look like a committee, let's get a little more information from King County as to. We heard a little bit about it when we had that presentation last week, but I think it'd be the mechanics of how it's going to work, I think would be interesting for us to hear about.
My sense reading through King County, listening to other people talk about this, that really the teeth comes through people, positions specifically, or groups of people. So, a citizen board of kind, and language, even in the charter, in the place where I think it fits in our charter, assuming we don't add an article or a section, is Article 8 and 10. So in the personnel system, and then in kind of the last, I think it's the provisional general provisions part, where you maybe say you add a board, where you make the stipulation that contracts that San Juan County takes up require any contractors to also adopt the same perspectives and safeguards. There's not a lot of other place. Our charter is a fraction of the length of one section of some of the King County parts, and so I'm struggling to see how we find teeth, even if it's in an ordinance. I mean, stipulating how hires are made would certainly, there's place for some language about representation and fairness, and short of that, I'm not suggesting that we don't have somebody from that new endeavor in King County come talk to us, but this is one of the places where I know I'm struggling across the board. Where in the charter, how in the charter do you create the structure? And the climate environment sort of czar approach actually sounds maybe most difficult to get past the electorate, but maybe one of the most simple ways to create to create a mechanism, a clean mechanism, because everything else is really approaches sort of window dress, I feel. So to hear the manager talk about that solution from last year, the first time I ever heard reference that. I work pretty closely with the sheriff's department consistently, and I would say that some of the books we're talking about are priorities there. There's certainly room always for education and for establishing priorities, but I really want us to create something from this, and my sense so far is that it really has to be accounted for in our charter by position or by uh, a team approach where there's a mechanism for us to evaluate, for the charter creates a mechanism to, hold feet to the fire, I guess. And I'd be willing to go along this meeting to kind of establish what other people think, because I think that's part of I have a lot of hopes. I share the beacon of hope statement that Kevin made. I subscribe to that fully. But it has to, Bill App made this reference a couple times, it has to have structure and be passed by the voters ultimately next time, whenever it comes up. So how to make it structural and not content is, I'm struggling with that. Kevin.
Couple points. One is on your last point, issues of justice and equity and climate are going to pass the vote. It's our job to put the structure in place so that it's actually workable. But I have no doubt there's some members of the commission who are like, an elected climate commissioner is never going to sell. And I just laugh. I'm like, I've done polling in this community for 20 years, and I can tell you that will pass. And we could paint a cow blue and say it's the climate commissioner, and it would, people are going to get excited. So,
Especially if you paint it blue, by the way.
probably. So my focus is really aligned with what you were just saying, though, Kyle, maybe for a separate reason. I'm not worried about how we sell it to the public. I'm worried about the fact that if we come up with a bold idea, the background behind that bold idea is legitimate and real, fiscally responsible and appropriate to do what we say we're going to say. I've brought it up before, but the first freeholders who passed the first charter sold a bill of goods that was crap. They came in and said it was going to be revenue, that we were going to save money. They said we were going to save over $1 million, and it cost us over $3 million to move to the first charter. It was extremely expensive. And as we saw, because we reversed it 5 years later, most of their biggest decisions, it wasn't the right plan. And so I want to make sure that what we do is real, in addition to being bold. And so we've got to be bold. We've got to do these things, but it's our job to put the there. Sorry.
Yeah,
Any other comments or questions on that point?
Yeah. Is there
Go ahead,
any,
Sharon.
a couple of my friends I was talking to are Asian American, and, they were saying that, well, until the Trump administration, until COVID, the amount of prejudice against Asian Americans had become a lot more subtle since 1960 until the Trump era. But they also said that there's still structural racism. I don't know that that's in our county specifically, but it just got me thinking, should we be looking to see if there's old remnants of stuff that are still in there in any way that are contributing to why we have so little diversity still in the same one? Stuff that's written into law, stuff that has to do with policy or sale of land or anything like that.
So
I guess I missed that, Sharon. In the current charter or in state law or anywhere?
In anything within the county, and I guess within the state too.
Kevin, go ahead.
That's why we do it in the charter. The short answer to your question is yes, there is inherent racism. And the BLM movement this last summer woke us all up to historic racial injustice and inequity across the country. And then it showed a spotlight that there's still an underbelly that's just as ugly in San Juan County. Maybe it's not as blatant. I think the people that believe that way or would speak out as blatantly as other communities around the country are more silenced here, but it still exists. And but it's why we have to do this in a county charter. Your example of Trump is perfect. So many of us felt that the country was making just incredible strides towards gender equality, and there was less sexism. And then Hillary ran, and we realized, well, actually, first Barack Obama ran, and when I'll never forget, first time I walked into the White House after he was elected, what I saw out front of the White House was just such blatant racism, it blew me away. I was like, oh my God, I thought we as a country were beyond this, and we're not. I literally started crying. It blew me away. When Hillary ran, I realized, holy shit, we are more sexist than we are racist, and we're pretty damn racist. And so when Trump got elected, it showed me things can change on a dime in really horrible ways. And so that for me underscores why our county charter is where we do this. We think we're so progressive and so bold and so liberal that this county would never go that direction. And we're probably right, but I want to guarantee it. And you can't guarantee it through an ordinance. You sure as hell can't guarantee it through a resolution. It's got to be in the charter. One other point I had, Kyle, quick.
So with
Sorry. I
sure.
was just going to say, one of the things this made me think about, though, and I want to bring this back to Randy soon for the whole commission, is I don't know how the charter implementation gets interpreted. So when a law is passed in Olympia, the laws are pretty specific, but they don't have everything in there. So then there's what's called legislative intent, and a judge will literally go back and listen to hearings and look at the record of what the lawmakers, when they passed that law, actually intended. And I have no idea if there is similar way to interpret a charter. And so do we have to, and then, Kyle, you made me think of this when you were speaking a moment ago. Do we have to, when we write this up, be so specific that, you know, the charter commission, if we're talking about a charter, law and justice commission, they will oversee these agencies. They will have this order, how specific do we need to get in what we write up? And then how is that interpreted on the ballot too? Because the ballot isn't going to have, the whole charter. It's going to say, do you want a law and justice committee? And people go, yeah, sounds great. So I need to figure out with Randy, and we need to figure out as a subcommittee kind of how much detail we feel we need to put in there, and then how it gets interpreted.
Jay.
Yeah, I think it was the last meeting we had with the commission. I can't remember who said this, but my understanding is that the language of the charter has to be extremely clear and has to be such that you can't poke holes in it. That the intent of the language has to be just very, 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 very tight. That was my takeaway, and I really can't recall who said that. Maybe it was Randy himself. I do wonder, and maybe we don't need to worry about this. I can't help but wonder, and this is maybe my inside voice speaking, how much Randy Gaylord is going to like the notion of a law and justice oversight committee. So let's be honest with each other that he may think this is bull. He may not. He might think this is ridiculous. But I don't know. And this is where we need to do our homework, right? We need to, that's why I'm thinking it could be useful to just have a side conversation with some of those people in King County to find out, how they're creating it. And I suspect, didn't it just pass recently, the amendment? Was it just last November? So come on, this is super early days. They're probably still trying to work out what the terms of reference of this committee actually are, what its mandate's going to be, and so on and so forth. It could be quite an interesting time, actually, to talk to them. So we are meant to go back to our prosecuting attorney and his colleague to get advice on issues that we're raising. I can't help but wonder how he feels about it personally. Sorry, am I saying something I shouldn't be saying? I don't know.
No.
There has to be a place for this.
My feeling is all eyes are on him. He knows all our eyes are on him. And he's going to be retiring soon. I don't know if that's even, a factor in this, but I would like, oh, go ahead.
No, finish your thought, please.
Okay.
No, I have a hard time imagining him pushing back against it, but I don't know.
No elected official
Kevin?
is going to, no elected, thank you, Mr. Chair, sorry. No elected official is going to want oversight over their department, period. Randy Gaylord, when we became a sanctuary county, was totally supportive, except for oversight over his department. He said that the prosecuting attorney's department should not be part of it and was opposed to it in the beginning. And it took us basically saying we're going to go to a vote of the people with or without you, not to Randy necessarily, but to some of the other electeds too. We're saying the same thing. There is a reason why, and by the way, another person who may want to speak to our subcommittee is Kevin Carter on Orcas Island, who has been for a year now running the justice and equity discussion through the community resiliency process. And has a working group that's been dealing with matters, and they're the ones who put the resolution together. And originally, and they didn't know, there was no discussion about resolution versus ordinance. And when I brought it up to them, they had already presented the resolution to the county council. And anyway, there was chuckling that, oh shit, should we have done it differently? Anyway, in doing that though, they went and sat down with the sheriff. And Jane, to your point, the early drafts had a lot of stuff in there. They sat down with the sheriff and it changed dramatically. Even the resolution, this is not even an ordinance. So I can imagine a situation where the prosecuting attorney's office or the sheriff or the courts may come back and say, wow, that's an incredibly important idea and you should totally do it. Just don't have it have oversight over me. Sorry, Kyle.
That wasn't for you. That was symbolic. Okay, we are 1 minute dive group, and this is pretty critical conversation. I think we're going to be here often, and so unless people have other concerns about it, I would recommend that we continue until the conversation kind of meets this part of it meets kind of a natural close. We have maybe 3 others to cover. I would recommend that for the maybe our next cycle, for next week's meeting, we focus solely on how we impact the charter on this topic, and have some thoughts from people on specific cases and specific mechanisms, both to put language or change language in the current writing, and more specific ideas about how to do citizen boards, or how to do an oversight committee or board, and then pick 1 or 2 people maybe that we've discussed so far to try and hear from, if we can in that short amount of time, and make that our agenda for next week, and then come back to some of the other things we've talked about. We have a number of other names and thoughts from social services and aging. We have disability access, all number of different things, maybe to push for later in March or April. Thoughts on that suggestion? Kevin.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I think that sounds great. One suggestion, even though I hate putting it out there, maybe when we have speakers, we bump the meetings to an hour and a half so the speaker can present to us for a full 30, 40 minutes or something, and then we can have a significant amount of time to digest what they've said and think about it and maybe come up with actions.
Deliberate. Okay, I'm hearing that. I'm thinking that all of our meetings I think we'll struggle to maintain an hour with the nature of the topic, but I would entertain a conversation about that part alone. Sharon.
I have no problem going for another half hour on, regularly.
Okay.
I
Jane,
can,
you're nodding. Any
I
thoughts from
can
you?
as well. Yeah, I can go additional
Okay.
half hour. I like what, I agree with what Kevin's suggesting is that we would definitely need another half hour anyway if we're bringing speakers in. So I think that, yeah, I think that makes good sense.
Okay, well, with the time, so I have this question. We're plan sounds like to hear from Sheriff Krebs in the general session this week. Is the topic or kind of the range chosen at this point, Kevin?
So he's been bumped. He can't make it this Wednesday, so he's going to be on the 10th, I believe. But I was actually going to close my time with you guys to ask you what you'd like him to present. I want him to cover the basics. He needs to cover the basics of his office and his department as one piece of his presentation. But because this is such a big issue, I thought that, if you guys have specific questions or ideas or would like to help structure his presentation, just let me know. But I think this subcommittee bringing up ideas would be a good thing.
Jane?
Yeah, I'm just going to go back to the fact that at least the resolution exists, right? I think it's an opportunity to talk to the sheriff about the resolution. I mean, I think we should take any opportunity we can when we get to speak in our larger commission meetings, to ask these people who are either elected to work for our county government or appointed to work for our county government, what's being done with this? What's being done with this resolution? Because I think the more information we can gather about what's not being done with it is greater fodder for an argument that it's not strong. It doesn't. And I like what you're suggesting. I was very curious who wrote it. And so you just referenced Kevin Carter. I think it would be, I think it could be very interesting to have a conversation with him and one or more others who were involved in the penning of it. But I think I would absolutely want to talk to the sheriff about what this means to his office. And I'm prepared to have a further conversation with Randy, who said in his email, he said, I haven't had a chance to reach out to my office to talk to them about this, but it sounds like there's an openness to do that. It sounds like there's an openness, on his part to speak with his staff about that resolution, and what they feel they've done with it so far. So I really feel like we need to get some evidence and information. And I think we want to ask counselors as well. Well, that would be Jamie and the two that are no longer sitting on council could be interesting, although I don't know that they're going to have a lot to tell us.
Kevin, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Two things. One is I think that the fact that this was adopted 6 or 7 months ago and the prosecuting attorney is saying I haven't had an opportunity to circle back with my office to talk about this yet tells you the difference between an ordinance and a chart and a resolution. So, and the other thing is back to the previous conversation on specifics. Whatever we do, not only do we need to be specific, I think we need to put dates certain in it. When I would pass a law in Olympia, it would say this law will be enacted on June of this year after being signed by the governor. And by this date, by December 31st, 2021, these actions will have been, implemented or whatever. The other thing I wanted to point out is that on the New Deal San Juan Islands website is also an entire draft ordinance in addition to the resolution that was passed. So if you go to Justice, if you go to newdealsanjuanislands.com and then you go to Justice, there's an entire ordinance there. And I think a lot of that language could be interpreted for what we're talking about as well.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Right. Kyle, my question for you at this junction, if I can ask the chair a question, is
Please go ahead.
What would you like us to do in advance of our meeting next week? What would you like us to come prepared, with in the way of sort of background work we've done?
First question I was going to ask, or point I was going to make, I think, is as much as I am fired up about a lot of this, it makes sense for us, I think, to Kevin's point, to kind of prepare some question, or at least give somebody like the sheriff an idea about, we want to ask him specifically about the solution, so that there's an opportunity. I mean, Historically, that can be an opportunity to kind of present a canned or put together a canned answer that really does address our questions, but they have an open opportunity to ask those questions. I'd much rather have some of that start with, the question posed, a chance to ask more specific questions. I think for next time, if the sheriff isn't speak until March 10th at the earliest, that does give us an opportunity with Mr. Carter and on that team ahead of time. So that would be a sensible person to hear from. It seems to me like this idea of language in the charter and structure in the charter around discrimination and equal access, et cetera, is our more pressing, if only for how to address the structural part in the charter, our most pressing component so far. If people have exception, I certainly want to hear that now, but we'll focus on that for next week. Let's hear from, I think one, not more than 2 people time makes sense on topic, so we can talk that kind of together. And we would, I would love to hear from somebody like Kevin, Mr. Carter, about, how much time makes sense. I don't have a sense of that, so 20, 30 minutes. And then open questions. And guess focus, have all of us, to your question, Jane, have all come with ideas about how to structure our own charter document with, for one, we've talked about language. So language that's directive in nature, and then potentially creating new structural
Elements.
specifically mission, a citizen board, structural elements, thank you, to directly address this moving down the road. So, knowing we haven't really spoken with Randy on what's legal, but for next step, that's my recommendation. Is that enough guidance?
Who's going to get in touch with
Yes.
with Kevin then? Who's going to reach out to him?
I know him.
You
Yeah,
do?
is he in agreement that that's a sensible person to talk?
Yeah. I reached
Okay.
out to him
And
about 2 weeks ago to tell him that this subject has come up, and he and I have played phone tag and not spoken yet. So Kyle, you reaching out would be awesome too.
okay,
I just want to say I was
that. And tell me again. Go ahead, Sharon. Sorry.
Oh, just to say that, is it okay? I don't, does it feel like this is a good time for me to continue reaching out to people that I know in the community and getting some feedback from them based on their experience living in San Juan County over many years?
Yeah.
It's like,
I
it
think
was
just
really,
from the head nods, there's a
yeah, because it was great to hear from at least
um,
a couple of friends so far that they have been experiencing racism in San Juan County, and it was great to hear that. I want to talk to other people too, and they said, we are not experiencing it here, but we kind of live in a bubble, and we have family and friends that are living in other places and in big cities that are experiencing a lot of racism. So that doesn't, so I said, well, we want to see how what we do here in San Juan County can be, like you said, a beacon, an example of what can be done in other communities and cities.
Jane, go ahead.
Kyle, would you like me to have that conversation with Mike Thomas, and also perhaps have a conversation with Randy about, what progress, if any, has been made on this resolution, just to gather a bit of background information?
I think that's valuable. I think the most sensible piece is to use the week back and forth like you did today to talk about what you're feeling, and not wait until you're to wait till next Monday. But I know I'm breaking up a little bit. yeah, have that conversation now. I'd be surprised if either one of them has more to share, but I hope maybe I'm wrong about that. But if you could pose that to them this week
Mhm.
and let us know what you find out.
Okay.
And we're just going to be. This is to take more than a couple of meetings, certainly.
Mhm.
So
Mhm.
I would love to hear from other people. And buried in this, I think, is another question or comment we made this week, that access to government is a piece of this, and the underserved populations are how they receive these intentions, and what their experience from day to day is going to be relevant. And I'd like to hear from them also down the road. Kevin?
Two things. And one is Kyle Loring, who's an attorney on San Juan Island, is the attorney who worked on the entire New Deal process, wrote the Law and Justice Ordinance. There was an original ordinance that was very similar to the resolution we passed, but was an ordinance. And he has spent a lot of time thinking about this subject as far as what can be done at the county level. It might be interesting. I don't know if he presents to us, but it would be interesting, I think, to circle back to him, particularly on the questions of what's possible. How far can we go? The other thing I started thinking is his wife, Katie, is a judge here in San Juan.
Okay.
And it might be really interesting to ask her if she'd be willing to speak to us. She is fantastic. She's also just a really good person on these sorts of issues. I have no idea how she is judicially, but I imagine that her idealistic views and her core values help dictate how she is as a judge. So I imagine she's just incredible that way. And it might be interesting to see if she wants to speak to us about, what something like this would look like in the courtroom for her department.
Mhm. Yeah.
With that in mind, I think why don't we try this? Let's have every one of us for next week, or for next week, propose more than 3 people who this specific topic that we would hear from in committee, and why. And we will try. Jane, this will probably be maybe potentially be agenda for next time, but try and figure out how we hear from them, move forward, and kind of set structure of our committee time for make sure we cover all this to opt with the time together. I just struggle to think that if we take every one of the pieces that we want to ton and we try and cover those every meeting, we're going to struggle with momentum. I'd be curious how you all think. Kevin, did you have some first?
You broke up a little bit for me anyway, so I wasn't clear on what you were asking. Were you asking us to reach out to those people, or are you asking us to come to the next meeting prepared to suggest they should be?
The latter.
Okay.
At this point, I think we have enough for the next meeting, but we would finish the next agenda with pick from that list to hear from for whatever our next second meeting would be. Sharon?
I think it can't hurt to reach out to people now, because then we can find out their availability and how they would like to participate. For example, the friends of mine I spoke with today, I suggested, that they attend the town halls, and they said they're busy that week and they're not going to be able to. We talked on the phone and I took notes on what we discussed. I told them, I said, tell me how you would like to participate in this. Would you like to speak to the committee? Would you like to speak at the town hall? Would you like to just talk to me and have me take notes and run them past you? And, so that's what we ended up doing today. So I took notes on our conversation. I sent them to them. They made some edits, sent it back to me. And then I can just submit those for, as part of our committee records as their testimony. So, but some people may want to come and speak to us one-on-one. People may have different desires in terms of how they want to participate.
Would one of the meetings where we invited, I don't know what the number would be, more between 3 and 8 or 2 and 10 people to listen in the idea that we could have open questions and have a discussion and hear from people that wasn't quite as scripted or wasn't a presentation followed by questions from us. Is that format productive enough? If we presented them with certain questions or subtopics that talk about, like, for instance, what is your experience as a person of color in San County? What is your experience as someone yeah,
Yeah,
I'm
it's
not
true.
sure quite how to word that at this point, but
We need to have people talk to us who
what do
actually
people think
have
of
the
that?
expertise in how to include this language and how to actually make it into part of the charter structure. And then we have the people that just have experiences to share with us. So there's two different things. I know we do really need to meet with people that can
Right.
actually help us put this into the charter. That has to be a priority.
I will.
Jane, Kevin, you're both heads down. Jane, you didn't by a split second. Go ahead.
Just a quick question going back to what Kevin told us about this Kevin Carter and group creating this resolution. It just strikes me that I'd be interested to hear about why it was created, and a little bit about, what's so this has come about. So why has this come about, and whose voices does this represent? And I think this is in a way a bit of an important starting point for us, because I'm not convinced. I don't mean to say I'm not convinced. To some extent, we need to do some kind of problem identification, to the points that Kevin was making earlier, which is what is not working, or what could be improved. And so I just wonder, in order to have meaningful conversations with people, we need to at least be able to say we understand and recognize that there are these justice and equity issues in our county. We have evidence of this. This is what that is, and we feel that our county could do better, and could breathe some life into this resolution that was passed. So anyway, I'm just sharing that because I think it could be useful, perhaps even as early as next week, to have Kevin Carter and maybe someone he worked with talk to us about this, about the genesis of this resolution, and then have a few other questions we could ask him. I don't know, it's just a suggestion, but I also really liked what Kevin was saying about the wife of Kyle Loring, a judge, and getting her thoughts on how realistic is it to think that we can make a change in the charter. So anyway, I think I want to understand how big the problems here are. I know they exist, but I don't I don't know, I don't have any evidence of where it says they exist, other than anecdotal.
Kevin, did you have some additional?
Yeah, I'm going to send you guys the resiliency report that was done by the Orcas Island Community Foundation this summer, or this fall, which led to several different work groups being formed. One of them was the racial equity and injustice group that Kevin Carter has led. So I'll send you that report, or the link to that report right now. One of the things, and Jane, this gets exactly to your point. So New Deal San Juan Islands was working on this justice resolution for a year, and then the racial justice and equity group started working on their resolution, and we immediately pulled back because we were mostly middle-aged white people, and there were members of our Latinx population, Kevin Carter, who's African American, and others. And I'm feeling like we're in a similar situation. And so I want to just acknowledge that I'm feeling that. And we can be as bold and liberal and progressive on these issues as we want. And what I'm learning is that my white privilege has sheltered me from being able to actually understand a lot of that and what's happened. So there's that piece. So I think that would underscore for me why it's so important that we get someone like Kevin Carter, who's been leading this discussion on Orcas, but also others. There's many others. And there's also a very silent Latinx population in our community that if we can give voice to them. So Kevin Carter, who's an educated, a successful individual is one person, but going to some others in our population and really reaching out, I think is our duty.
Sharon.
I just want to say, I have not seen a bunch of the Latino population on Orcas since the beginning of the pandemic. I don't know. I've seen a few people, but not a lot of people. And one of the things I've been doing is studying Spanish, just online, because I studied Spanish for 6 years in junior high and high school, but I was never fluent, and it's been a long time. And I've been using Duolingo, which is free on the internet, and getting my Spanish back so that I can actually engage with my Latino community here, because I think that it's really important.
Kevin.
Sorry.
Thanks, Sharon. Kevin, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. You want names for next meeting? You want to bring your names next meeting?
Oh, bring your name. So I'm not sure I was clear, Jane. I think we hear from Mr. Carter next time, perhaps someone else, but at least him, about the components of the New Deal and the resiliency output, and then bring the names and pick from the remaining list for more of an large discussion around issues of discrimination. And I think we all have people we could sure that we have. Clearly Sharon has. I can think of 2 other people that would potentially want to participate, be singled out and print to us, but would want to participate in more of a conversation. And I would pose that for 2 meetings out. So get a sense of the landscape next time from Mr. Carr, potentially. I can certainly ask Mr. Loring or Judge Loring also, and maybe that's the time for it. I'm aware that we're pressed for time, but I also want to give this plenty of daylight, if as much as we can. That would be I'm certainly not in charge, but that would be my proposal. So next week, schedule and approach Carter for next week, bring our names, and then at the end of next meeting, discuss who we want for this conversation type of approach for the following meeting. Jane?
Can I just suggest one other thing, and that is that if we look again at these issues that were raised, a number of them by you, Kyle. I had kind of this motherhood issue, and Kevin had his committee issue. I feel we need to do something with this list of issues in terms of thinking about, how do these mold together somehow, or what do we? Because I look at these and I can see how potentially there could be something that encompasses them all in some way, but I'm not clear on that. And I wonder if it wouldn't be useful to spend a few minutes next week talking about these. And so I think it'd be great to hear from Kevin Carter along the lines of the work that he did with his group last year. But then perhaps move into a bit of a conversation about, okay, so what does this potpourri say to us about what's important? And anyway, so if that's helpful, because we do need to report back to our commission on what we're, how we're tackling the issues that were on the table. Is that?
And Jane, I'll say if I appreciate what you're saying. I did took a little step at, so if I remember correctly, the original is 6, if not fit 6, and some of those, especially mine, coalesced, especially after last week's conversation, and I kind of redrafted or I put into the minutes or the agenda document for today slightly different way, and I think they may further coalesce. I'm curious, we don't have time right now, but I'm curious you guys think about how they're written up when you're through the agenda. And there's some other people that are a big list of some of the people that we would to hear from.
Okay. Okay. I see
So
that. Yeah, I see that paragraph there. Okay. So that's kind of what you were doing with that paragraph there.
it is.
Okay. Okay.
And all that's open. It's not doesn't have to be official, but I'm trying to find that. I've lost thread here. Okay, so we wanted with the last couple of minutes here, because we'll meet again before the actual town halls. Maybe we tabled this element. I'm just curious how we want to set up our two or top three, and how maybe we'll talk about in the general group how to actually present. We've discussed and prioritize far in a way that we can pass on to a general listener who comes on to the whole meeting. So it's clear what we already identified, and someone who comes at venue some other topic will know that it fits in what we're talking about already, or it's new business. Sharon?
I'm sorry, I do have another call. I'm supposed to get on at 5:30. Just to let you know.
Okay.
Okay. Well, I didn't do the best. Go, Kevin.
We can continue on email too.
I was just going to say in closing, I actually think hearing from Kevin Carter soon is important, really important, but I think that it needs to be broader. I think there's actually 3 groups that need to be represented. One would be Kevin Carter would represent them. The other one is Berto Gonzalez, who is the priest here on Orcas Island, who is Latin as well as gay. The third is a member of the Lummi Nation. They are distinct voices that I think all 3 are very important, different aspects of this conversation. And I don't think you can have one without the other.
Yeah, I think Berto, by the way, Gandara. It's Gandara,
Yeah,
Berto Gandara. But he really is our conduit to the Latino community
Okay.
on Orcas, at least. Yeah,
Okay.
he's wonderful, by the way. He's a great guy.
But the Lummi person, is it a woman? Because I really.
Sharon would be.
Oh, it would be Sharon. Okay. Yeah, because I want women's voices in this as well. Yeah. Okay. So are you suggesting, Kevin, we have all 3 of those or like presenter?
I don't know if you can do them at the same meeting with 3 people. It takes a lot of time. I wouldn't have them at the same time. I would have them back to back if they were. But what I'm saying is, for us to educate ourselves, I think there's the indigenous story that we need to hear is so different than Carter's
For sure.
or the Latinx story.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I'm thinking we should either have one group at one meeting, or have Kevin and Berto on one meeting, separately but on the same meeting, and then have the Lummi Nation separately too. And especially because it's really hard to say to anybody, "Oh, we're running out of time," but it's especially hard with the Native Americans, because they don't go on the clock, really. And I don't like to say, "Oh, we're out of time now," if we don't have to. If we can give them more time rather than less time. Does that sound appropriate?
Yeah.
I share that sentiment. This is part of what I was trying to get at. I think time is short, and I'm motivated to try and hear from everybody. But I think for this, I think our group is going to struggle to stay concise each meeting and to feel like we've covered ground. And this is a consensus group, but I would love to and maybe hearing from Berto and hearing from
Kevin Carter?
Sharon, might be maybe a presentation form. No, I think, can we all agree that we want Kevin to talk to and Carter to speak next week?
Yeah.
No, great. You could do Kevin and Berto at the same time, and they're both working together on there's weekly meetings that have been going on for 6 months on this issue on Fox Island, and Kevin's the lead, but Berto's been very engaged. And so I think having those two together would be
Okay.
Okay, great.
Okay.
Okay.
That works for me. It was a nod of consensus. Okay, Sharon, I just wanted to honor your time here. Let's work that list of names, work on specifics in our chart where you see opportunity to, and we're not going to fix overnight, but where pieces would fit or where specific charter language would be amended or strengthened. And then I think we'll wait till time to talk about outreach for the town halls. In the time, I would just make a pitch to continue whatever form you're using to try and encourage the public to attend those meetings, book or however you're doing that. And any other points of order for the group
Yeah,
here?
I just want to clarify. So Kyle, you're going to reach out to Kevin Carter, and Kevin, you're going to reach out to Sharon Kinsey?
Sharon Kinley. I can reach out to Berto too. I think Sharon will be a couple meetings out, but I can reach out to Berto easily.
Great.
Okay.
And would it be, sorry, is this same time every week?
Yeah.
It is.
Okay.
So
Does that continue to work?
Yeah, so it would be your intention that it would be Monday, the 8th at 4:00.
Monday the 8th at 4, yes.
Okay.
International Women's Day.
Yes.
Ah,
Yeah, okay. Sounds good. Mr. Chair, do you want me to send out an agenda for next week then, based on this discussion, or a draft of one anyway, or send it to you and you and I can massage it and then send it around, or what would you like?
So let's try and tag team next one. I built this one mostly off of Sharon's notes and
Okay.
all from the meetings. One of the things that I want to do, and I think we've accomplished that, is try and tighten it. To tighten, we focus on kind of at a time, and I feel good about it. So maybe the agenda is smaller or more concise
Okay.
for next time, but let's do that and I.
Okay, so I can do you want me to take a first crack at it and share that with you then?
Sure.
Okay.
That's great. That'll summarize our action items for next
Okay.
week.
And maybe I'll
And
wait
I
for,
think we can do that for,
go ahead. Go ahead.
I was just gonna say, I think we can do that for the next meeting out also.
Okay.
Just make sure we capture what we talk about.
Okay. Okay. I'm wondering if Sharon,
That makes sense.
I might wait for Sharon to send out her notes if she sends them. Hey Sharon, should I wait for you to send out your notes? Are you planning on just shipping those off real quick, or what was your plan?
yeah, I have have to get on another call, but I will do
yeah.
it within the hour for
Oh,
sure.
yeah, no, I mean tomorrow or whatever. Yeah. Okay.
I'll do it today.
Okay. Okay.
I
Sounds
just want to go through them and make sure they're coherent.
okay.
The last would add, is maybe put together questions you have specifically for the sheriff for his conversation or his appearance on the 10th.
Okay.
Less of an agenda item, but we said we would do that, and I think Kevin's point about us being kind of the more relevant to hear from for him is probably important.
Okay.
Kevin, thought?
I was just going to say, and
Go
also
ahead.
if we could decide which of you, it won't be me, sorry, will present to the commission on Wednesday, the full commission, and what you may want to cover. We don't need to go over that now, and also you don't need to have concrete, oh, we spoke about these 10 things. You can literally just say, we're talking about, equity and justice, and we don't have any conclusive things. You might want to say, we're going to have, these people present to us next week, though, if anybody wants to join in to listen.
Yeah. And just say we've been gathering input and looking at the structure, and we're going to have these people next week. Yeah, I think that's great.
And maybe
And
say,
we're
we're going to come up with just incredible ideas. And if you guys don't adopt them entirely, we're going to taser you.
nice. I like how you fit that together.
So who wants to volunteer to speak to the group?
Well, I don't mind doing it this week if you like. And we can take turns. I don't mind. It's fine.
Brief.
I've approved of that such. Brief and in Spanish. Please, por
Okay,
favor.
Sharon, we'll
Yo
take.
trato de hablar en español.
Oh, we'll take you up on your offer. I think, Sharon. Does everybody agree with that?
Sounds great.
Okay. Okay.
I'll be brief. All right, you guys, I'm going to head out and I'll get those notes to you.
Everybody,
Okay. Thanks, guys.
Thank you very
can
much.
can we adjourn by consensus?
Motion to adjourn.
Seconded.
Thank you all.
Consensus.
All-
Okay.
All in favor.
Oh,
Good
Bye.
to see you, Kevin, for joining.
Yeah.
Oh,
Bye.
Kevin, I had a question for you. Can we talk a little later? It's a quick question, but your
Tomorrow.
voicemail was full. Okay, tomorrow?
Bye,
It's been full for a year. I like it that way.